As you land in Jeremiah chapter 10, if you were here a few weeks ago and you were with us at Jeremiah 7, you'll know that Jeremiah chapter 7 through Jeremiah chapter 10 constitute what is known as Jeremiah's temple talk. So here's what's going on. People are streaming back to the temple under King Josiah's reforms for the first time in years, and they're giddy with excitement, and there's at least surface level revival going on. And when they arrive at the gate of the temple, here's Jeremiah with this sobering message they're not expecting to hear. And what chapter 10 does is it kind of winds down the temple talk, is it continues a theme we looked at last week in Jeremiah chapter 9 and verse 23, where it proclaims by the prophet's pen, "Thus says the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, let not the mighty man glory in his might, nor let the rich man glory in his riches, but let him who glories glory in this, that he understands and he knows me." And so as the temple talk winds down here in this chapter we'll look at this morning, chapter 10 is going to present a stark contrast between man's wisdom and God's wisdom. So in chapter 10 verse 1, "Hear the word which the Lord speaks to you, O house of Israel. Thus says the Lord, do not learn the way of the Gentiles, and do not be dismayed at the signs of heaven," the stars, astrology, horoscopes, "for the Gentiles are dismayed," or they're enamored at them. And so he tells them, don't go the way of the Gentiles. Now, interestingly enough, it's going to be the Babylonians that God is going to use 40 years from this time to judge the nation of Judah. And yet it was the Babylonians who initially began to study and trust in the stars. And so when you think all the way back to Genesis chapter 11 and the story of the Tower of Babel, you get these people shortly after the Lord commanded Noah and his family to leave the ark. After judging the earth with the flood, he says, fill the earth and multiply. And then in Genesis 11 here, the people, instead of filling the earth and multiplying, they stay in one spot, the plain of Shinar, and they build a ziggurat, a pyramid-shaped temple. And by the way, it was waterproof, it was flood-proof, and they began to worship the stars. And the temple was actually called Babel, which means gate of El, God. And yet what does God do? He looks at them and their rebellion and their worship of creation over the Creator, and he looks at their hard hearts and that they would not fill the earth and multiply, and he says, hey, let us, the Trinity, go down and see what's going on. And so he says, boy, now that they've done this, nothing will be withheld from them. They'll do whatever they want. So he scatters them and he confuses their language. And interestingly enough, with God's sanctified sarcasm, he turns the word Babel from gate of God to, if you think of the word Babel throughout history, you think of it blah, 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 blah. He frustrates their very wisdom. They're babblers. And so God, he intervenes, and why he intervened was that they were studying and worshiping the stars, astrology. It's the study of the movements and the relative position of celestial bodies interpreted as having influence on human affairs in the natural world. And so they begin to worship instead of just study. And then they came up with horoscopes. From astrology, horoscopes were derived, which these horoscopes delineate a person's character, their circumstances, and forecast their future based on the relative position of the stars at the time of a person's birth. And you see this all over the known world in Gentile cultures, that they still rely upon the worship of the heavens. And so what he's saying is, don't get involved with that. Don't go the way of the Gentiles.